Okay. Welcome to, I believe this is episode 23 or 24. I should have wrote it down. Anyways, welcome to Brave Indigenous Conversations with Joan Jack. And today I have Tina Keeper, but before she introduces herself as if she needs an introduction, I'm going to read a bit of poetry that I found that I just love. An invitation to a brave space. Together we will create a brave space because there is no such thing as a safe space. We exist in the real world. We all carry scars, and we have all caused wounds. In this space, we seek to turn down the volume of the outside world. We amplify voices that fight to be heard elsewhere. We call each other to more truth and love. We have the right to start somewhere and continue to grow. We have the responsibility to examine what we think we know. We will not be perfect. It will not always be what we wish it to be, but it will be our brave space together, and we will work on it side by side. That was written by Mickey Scott B. Jones, who's gone to the spirit world, and when I first heard it, I just loved it. So here we are. And Tina's with us. I'm so thankful that you accepted my invitation. And I'd like, as you know, there are some people who don't know who we are. Yes, and especially you, people should know who you are, but maybe you could just let people know who you are.
Sure. Danze, Tina Keeper in Indigenous, and I am from Nori House, Cree Nation. And on my mother's side, I'm from Muskrat Dam First Nation and the Treaty 9 territory. My late mother was Phyllis Beardy, and my late father was Joe Keeper. And I'm a Kokum, of course, and I'm also a mother. And I was an actor. Well, I'm still an actor, I guess. And I'm a producer, a television producer. So I produce film and television now with Indigenous creators. And I have been a member of Parliament for the Churchill riding in Manitoba for one term. And yeah, so I'm just really a proud and grateful mother and Kokum, and really proud to be able to participate in, you know, all of the arts and culture sector, and provide opportunities to people and myself, and participate in, celebrating who we are.
Nice. So, um, what should we talk about, Tina?
Well, I was asking you how your family's doing. So um, I just want to all our viewers, maybe you should know that Joan and I go way back. So
Mhm.
we're both from the north, but we lived in the city and went to school. My family came here when I was starting school because my father was actually, we were working and living. He was working, and our family was living in a First Nation that was not either of my parents' home communities, but because of the hydro development. So he
Mm,
was working with one of the First Nations that was being forcibly relocated. But my mother asked my father to relocate to the city because she realized when her oldest daughter was going to start school that she was afraid that they would come and take her children.
mm.
So my mother had been of the first group in her community to be, just loaded onto a cargo plane um, in in the 40s. So
Mm.
I think that it was always very traumatizing for her, and so I know for my mother, um, I think just it just haunted her all her life,
Mm.
and but she forced my father to move to the city. So we
Yeah.
moved here when I started school, and but that's where I met you, Joan, and Joan and I. Yeah, like I think we were really fortunate to grow up at the time we did. We really had access to the old people still, the old language, and yet we're really fueled by, social justice, and
Yeah.
also too, I think the sense of self-determination that people still hadn't felt was they didn't feel that this was not their land.
Mm.
They felt, um, the idea was that we really had to restore justice and restore order to what had
Mhm.
happened to our communities. And we
Yeah.
still had a great sense of who we were, like
Mhm.
as, that sense of self-determination and the sense of, and even for myself, like for as an artist, like the sense of artistry and storytelling and oral storytelling and, like all of that rich culture was just still there
Yeah.
that we grew up with. So we're very fortunate.
Yeah. We started before I answer your question about my family, we were talking offline
Hmm.
about visiting and how it's such
Yes,
a key part of who we are as Indigenous people. And um like the visit is really for coming together with others. Sometimes we talk a lot. Reminded of a time I was in Manigatogan. Our dad used to live in Manigatogan, and I was doing some beadwork, and so I was at his house in Manigatogan, and my friend Kathy Bjork stopped on her way back to Whole River,
uh,
Hollow Water, and she came in. I looked up from my beading, and I said, "Oh, hi, Kathy," and she said, "Hi," and I said to her, "Sit down with me." So she sat there, and I said, "You want some coffee?" And she said, "Yeah, sure." So we got her a coffee, and then we sat there, and we didn't talk.
right.
I just beat it for, geez, a long time, probably a half an hour, like I think she might have had 2 cups of coffee. And then she said, "Okay, I'm gonna go now." And I said,
Yes.
"Okay, love you so much." And she took off. And then after she left, my dad said to me, "Holy, did you ever have a really Nietzsche visit?" Like sometimes there's not even a need to talk. It's just about being in each other's presence, and
Yes.
yeah,
I
yeah.
think that's really true. And I've often like thought, now that I'm a grandmother, that my mother's family, my mother's parents didn't speak English, and neither did my
Mm,
mother's, aunts. So they were like my grandmothers, but they were very, very prayerful and very, they hadn't gone to residential school either. So they
mm,
still had this thing which was very affectionate, like physically affectionate too. And
mhm,
it was like, even if they just held you, there was always this holding hands, and especially with children, children were treated like, kind of like babies till they're about 8. And, but it was like literally, this sort of this sense, like I think what you're talking about, I find is, part of something that was, you know, one of the impacts, I guess, of like,
yeah,
all of the colonial policies was to break
yeah,
the sense of bond, that we have
mhm,
with each other, and
yeah,
the sense of a collective,
mhm,
humanity almost. It's
mhm,
really
yeah,
it's really something that has created sort of this rigid individualism, and I've
yeah,
seen mothers that say, "Oh, I don't kiss my baby," or "I don't, you know, hug I don't hug." It's and so things like that, and I can see
yeah,
where those are impacts, and
yeah,
I feel that one of the things I'm really grateful for, because my mother couldn't, hug me for a long time, you know,
mhm,
and it wasn't until I was, probably around 16
mm,
when my mother could finally hug me.
mm,
And so there's so many impacts around it. So what you're talking about, just even that visit,
yeah,
and is, I think, just really, um, and it's interesting because it goes back to the poem you read
mhm,
about this safety, like this place of, safe, something safe. And
mhm.
I'm just going to turn that off. Can I just take
Okay,
1 moment? I'm so
sure,
sorry. I'm
sure,
going to
that's
mute
okay.
myself for a sec. Can I
Okay,
mute myself? Yeah.
yeah. So I think you can still hear me, Tina. So, can you give me I'm sure you can still hear me. Well, I don't know. We'll just wait. Um, can you still hear me? Give me the thumbs up. You can still hear me? Yeah. Oh, there you are. She's back. Okay. So what I wanted to share was that the other thing that I think is really, it just occurred to me now in this moment with you, it solidified or it landed. Maybe unmute yourself. There we go. The thought landed. It's not that I hadn't had this thought before, but it really landed in the context of what we're talking about now, where the greatest thing about us as Indigenous people is that we're flexible, we adapt, and we're still who we are. And that visiting by being with, I realize that I do that with two of my adult daughters now on Facebook Messenger, for example. Shirley will say, "I miss you," and I'm like, "Okay, I'm here." And then she'll put on the video, and then just put her phone on the side, and then we are just with each other doing what we're doing.
That's
And
so
if
sweet.
she's making supper or whatever, and once in a while we'll say something, or not, and then finally it'll come to a moment in the visit, it's like, "Okay, I gotta go now. Okay, bye, see you soon." And I do that with Shirley. I do that with Lonnie. I do that with my friend Susan. Where we just be together in this new way of the
Right.
technology, instead of saying, "Oh, that's not our way. That's not our way."
Right.
No, our
Mm-hmm.
way is to be together. That's
Mm-hmm.
our way, in any way we can.
It
Yeah.
is. And you know what? So, what else I'm finding as I'm getting older is how much I appreciate, the sort of running into people say that are from the same community and our fathers grew up together, for instance. And
Mhm.
just even that, just,
Mm.
just really is so heartwarming and just really gives me a sense of, strength and uh, I don't know. There's something so powerful about that. I find
Yeah.
that as I'm getting older, I really, and maybe it's because things have changed so much too since we were young, it's, there's one, you can see everything is getting, about Indigenous people is coming to the forefront in this country.
Mm.
We're definitely, we have political clout in this country now. There is a sense of, self determination in
Yeah.
many different, amongst the nations. But there is also then a great disparity, with, I think the impacts,
Yes.
where we see we're still, you can see where I always think it's kind of a depraved colonial sensibility that
Mhm.
has created horrible impacts for our people,
Yeah.
and that affects all of us, our loved ones, our family members, and still, for many people, don't feel like they have a place in this country,
Yeah.
and but what I find as an individual is this sense of safety, comfort. Um, it's almost like an energy that makes me feel like I can just keep going. That, among when
Yeah.
I talk to people like yourself, or run into friends that,
Mhm.
our parents grew up together or worked
Yeah.
together, or, I ran into an academic at an event last weekend that I hadn't seen for a while. And she's, an elderly woman now. But again, like when I think of all that, how much she inspired me and just having a
Mm.
hug with her,
Yeah.
there's so much that,
I love I loved what you said about our parents' friends, and as
yes.
you've aged and how what they mean to you. It's the same for me, Tina. Like, the
Hmm.
people my parents worked, we had a grocery store, so my parents worked all the time. That's all they
Right.
did was work. So, there were very few people who came actually into our home to visit. Most of the visiting happened in the store. Um, but I can remember, for what one example is, Alvin Desbro at home was a good friend of my parents, really good friend, and I grew up sitting on his knee. And
Mhm.
he I think he had him and his wife, Verna, had like 15 kids. I don't know, a bunch anyway. And so, but the love that my mom and dad had for him, um, and that he had for me, I now transfer. to his children and grandchildren.
Right?
Yeah, like when I
Mhm.
see somebody from that family, I just love them. I have so much space and love in my heart for them, and I don't really care what they're doing, you know? I
Right.
just love them. And
Yes.
I love that you brought that up. That's our connectedness. That's how
Right.
we are as Indigenous people. We know that we are always connected, and
Yeah.
all we have to do is tap into that connection, and
Yes.
it's there, hey?
Hmm.
And then the impact, like you've been saying, the impact of colonization, of course, is what disconnects all human beings. Trauma,
Yes.
the impact of trauma, and how we view the trauma is what it disconnects us from that life around us and even the life inside us.
Yes.
That's been my personal journey anyway, is
Right.
that reconnecting, with my own spirit, and
Mhm.
the life around me is been a process, that's for sure. Yeah.
Yes, and it's interesting because I was well, two things. One is, that around the impacts, my parents, I talked to them when I was, in the house, because that was when the compensation agreement was being tabled in the house.
Mm,
And I had to respond to it on behalf of the Liberals um for that, for the speech. And I really was struggling because I thought I'm going to start crying. And I told my parents, I don't want to cry in front of these people.
yeah,
This is the system that did it to us. And
yeah.
my father and mother both said, as they always, the old people all say, well, you have to pray for them. And
Mhm.
remember that what they did to us, they did to themselves. They have done to them.
Amen. Amen.
And and that we would never do these things, that we had a different way, and our way took care of our children, our way took care of each other. This is not our way,
Mm,
but this is their way, so pray for them. And
mm,
that was so empowering.
mm,
And it made me realize too that, look to our own, right?
mhm,
To um and that takes a long time. Like, you can understand that intellectually, but it really, when it does, as you say, when it lands, um you understand that, it is those simple things like the connection, feeling safe with somebody, feeling like, you have to um really try and find space to be gentle for
yeah,
yourself, for your loved ones.
yeah,
That's all of that is really
yeah.
difficult, in a challenge as we, kind of
Well,
move through these times. And I think that it is, I often think back to, especially being from the north, our families are trapline people. And I think, people they were kind of zen, like there was a zen, energy. Like, I was talking to my cousin, she was visiting from Thunder Bay just yesterday, and I was telling her that, my mom, like her mom and my mom were sisters. And I said, but my mom was much older than her mom. And I said, my mom was telling me that when she was a child, she remembers praying when she would have been, this would have been in the 40s, before she went to residential school. So she said, I remember they were praying, the old ladies were praying, and they were praying for Chin Chin across the big ocean, big waters, and that there was a war. And she says, I
uh,
never knew what that was. I never knew what Chin Chin was. She said, and then I asked one of my cousins, and I said, who is Chin Chin? We used to pray for all the time. And her cousin said, that was Churchill. That was during Second World War.
oh my God.
So I thought, people think like, and it's interesting because I thought, the average Canadian wouldn't have even given a second thought to these, Cree women way up in northern Canada, and
Yeah,
even being aware of the war probably. And yet, our brothers and, our aunts and uncles are members of our communities were serving, their wives were praying. And and they were conscious of,
Yeah.
of the world, and
And
they
of the
were
connectedness, eh?
careful about it. Yeah, they were prayerful about it.
Yeah.
So
And I see their prayers as consciousness of the fact that we are connected,
yes,
as we send our prayers out into that connection,
yes,
in the with the request, kinenaskomene, like with
mm,
the request of for it to be, what we're praying for, eh? Yeah.
yes,
Couple of things you sparked in my thought that just keep coming up. Cuenco Shackley is a powerful Indigenous woman from British Columbia in what is also known as the Nicola Valley part of British Columbia.
and where
And
is that? I'm sorry.
it's right by Merritt, right near
Okay,
Merritt. Yeah. And
yes,
so I met Cuenco many years ago, and she, how you meet people for just a short time and they impact your life forever, like just
hmm,
change the trajectory of your life with one piece of information or whatever. So, yeah, she impacted me in so many ways. And one of the things she said reminded me of when you were sharing just now. When I was running for national chief, we're in the middle of
yes,
another election. When I was running, she said, Joan, she said, make sure you tell them that Canada is like an eagle, and everybody who immigrated to our land is one wing, and we are the other wing. And she said, so long as one wing is broken, we will never fly. Never. And so when you said that, what was done to us was done to the people who hurt us, hurt themselves. That's what Kwenko knew and shared with me, that it is the way it is. I could make a big speech about,
hmm.
whatever. I've been in a lot of marches. I could make a big
Yeah.
speech.
Well, and also too, as a lawyer, you've done a
Yeah.
lot of work.
So, but that's not the point of it, is though that for you and I think especially as we're aging, my role is changing, and yeah, anyway, more off that. The other thing you triggered was when you said, you basically, I heard the call for kindness, that
Mhm.
there's a need to call for kindness right now, kindness to ourselves, kindness to each other, which does mean don't speak up when something's wrong.
Right.
That
Mhm.
means speak up from that place of love. And I'll just finish with this. You
Right.
reminded me, our Premier Canu's father, Tobasana Kwatiban.
Mm.
I spent a lot of time with him, a lot of time. And one time we were driving down to, oh, it went out of my head, Red Lake, Minnesota.
Right.
And he was taking me to ceremony there. And I was saying Kachimanitu, Kachimanitu, and he said, stop saying that. And we were in a little car, and he was such a big man. And I said, why do you want to stop saying that? He said, white people say that, Joan. We don't say great spirit. It's not a great spirit. And I said, well, if it's not a great spirit, what is it? And he said, it's Kije Manitu. Kije Manitu. And I didn't know what Kije meant. I understood money too. I said, okay, okay, I hear you. What does Kije mean? He said, kind.
Mm.
We believe the power of the universe is kind, and it's everywhere. It's a kind spirit everywhere, and it's in you. And I was like, like drop the mic, earth, my brain shattered. It was like, oh, wow. Because having been raised in a colonial context,
Mhm.
the great spirit worked for me because it was up there and kind of a in control, kind of, maybe for me, was a punishing god.
Right.
Yeah. And so anyways, I just thought I'd randomly throw that in.
Well, I love that teaching. I love that. I love hearing that because I think that that's very true about, I know for me, and I just been really grateful that, those essentially that's what it comes down to was, that you have to take care of yourself because if you don't take care of yourself, and
Mm,
and that includes that safety, it includes speaking up, it includes like setting the boundaries, it includes being disciplined and having being ethical, like all those things, you try and do those things
yeah.
because it keeps you safe, and
Ah,
and then once you're safe you can take care of others,
you're
right?
right. Yeah.
and and so the idea, because I knew Tabasanakot too, because
Yeah.
him and my parents were
Yeah.
friends, right?
Yeah.
So um, when I would go to him, too, for like with a dream, he'd all say, ask your mother about this word. It was
Mm.
just, I mean, we're so fortunate to have had those
Oh
kind of
my God.
teachings. And I think that the idea of kindness is really at the core. And I guess, and as you said, it's not to be confused with weakness. It is, there's
Mm.
a strength in that.
Yeah.
And in fact, one of the quotes I read of Maya Angelou, who I had adored
I
since
love
I was
her
a
too.
teenager.
Yeah.
She said, it's if somebody takes a nip out of me,
Hmm.
I will shut it down,
Mm.
because it may seem like one little cut, but it could turn into 1,000. And
Mm.
that's not okay.
Hmm.
She said, so that is how I've learned to protect myself.
Yeah.
And that really meant a lot to me too, because, as I think, because one of the impacts I think is the lateral violence, the idea that
The nasty. Yeah.
we shouldn't be proud, that we shouldn't be like grand. And I always
Mm.
think that no, we should be grand. It is, we are just beautiful people. We're from this land. We
Mm.
are, as my mom's grandfather was Samson Beardy, Chief Samson Beardy. And he said, that this is God given,
Mm.
and our language.
Mm.
And that we bow to no authority but God. And I
Mm.
really
Mm.
like that,
Hmm.
and I think that, and as we are taught, I think in the old way that, we are directly related to God. Like that is how, self-determination was explained to me,
Hmm.
is that you are directly related to, you know,
Hmm.
the creator. And
Hmm.
and I think that that's really important for young people to remember. And
Yeah.
because especially young people, they're up against so much.
Yeah. Yeah.
I feel like the young generations, they have a very different reality. Like because when we were young, back home, if you go to the reserve, you were that was like a sanctuary.
Mm.
That hadn't we didn't even have drugs or alcohol in the communities at that time. And
Changed now. It's changed now.
it's changed now.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so where do people go? And I feel like that's part of the work that we're trying to do always, and is imagine, safe spaces and places where people can be well and find their dreams. And if that's to be, to raise your children and work at home, that's grand too. I
Yeah.
mean, I always think that people don't have to have, this idea of, um, and maybe that's like from the internet, I don't know. Everybody wants to be a TikTok star or something. I don't know. So, and I don't go on TikTok. It's a little bit too fast for me, but I understand it's very fun. But I mean, I think that there's the idea that people have that they have to be a star.
Mm.
And
So
it's
there's
like,
a few things you raised there. Like I believe there are relationships between these ideas. The idea of power, God-given power, you know,
mhm,
and the idea of force, you know, and the idea of humility
mhm,
and the idea of fame. And
mhm,
there's a relationship there that we're struggling with as Indigenous people. We're struggling with right now because this is just my understanding. I mean,
mhm,
whatever. So my understanding of, for example, humility through a Christian lens is to be like the quiet, stoic, well behaved Indigenous person which is nothing wrong with that if that's who you really are,
Yes.
you know?
Right.
But if you're not that, there's no space in the fallout of colonization for you to be big and powerful. And that's humble too. If what if what the God-given talent manifests is
Yes.
Tina Keeper, a movie star, that's amazing. And from an Indigenous lens, I get a kick out of it, you know? And
Well, and for the longest time, I really I still struggle with it to this day. This idea that because I'd never imagined that I was going to be an actor. I never imagined that
mm,
I was going to be in television or in movies. Like it was not part
when
of
we
how
were
I
in
saw
high
my
school.
life. And so when actually, and so because it, and in school, when I was in school, I was so shy when I was young. Like I wouldn't even do like, when in gym, you have to do your little performance or whatever for gymnastics or readings in the school. Like I wouldn't do them. I would refuse to do them because I was so shy. And then when I got the job on North of 60, when I got the gig, I honestly felt that there had been a mistake. From Creator had sent like the messengers and they came to the wrong person. Like it should have been this other actress, this other Indigenous actress, who's really pretty and wants to be famous. And, not, it was given to the wrong person and it was a mistake. That's how I felt for the longest. And not to say I didn't like the work. I loved the work. And, it was, and we had a really great experience. I got to work with Jordan Wheeler, the Cree writer. He was on our writing team. And we had a great producer who, listened to us. Like we
Mm,
would say, in our culture, we don't treat the elders this way. We wouldn't treat background performers this way. So
mhm,
they would listen to us and fix things, they
mhm,
would they would align themselves with what we were,
mm,
saying were our values. And that was really a big
mm,
deal in the industry.
yeah.
And so, but in terms of I think the impact that it had on me, I still don't understand it to this day. Like I still feel like, no, I'm just Tina. I'm still trying to figure out what to do with my life. And I am really enjoying producing, I have to say. And I always knew I was going to be a mother, and that's why I left that industry. I was really, and I didn't want to leave home. Like I didn't want to leave Manitoba. My family was here, and I didn't want to leave to go away and work,
Mhm,
outside my own community. So for a
mm,
long time, I stayed outside the television bubble, and
mhm,
stayed here, and that's how I ended up doing a run in politics. And we used to have for the party, we had the local office was in our First Nation. So we
mm,
had gotten involved because there had been a commission within the party for Aboriginal people to make a
mhm,
difference on the
mhm.
policies of the party. So,
So tell me
that's
more.
sort of the
Tell
interim.
tell us more about that. Like that is something I think about quite often. Is that there are some central questions in my life anyway that always show up. Do I get in and help to make change, or do I stay out and help to make change?
Yes,
Do I get in? Do I get out? So
right.
you got in and you went to Ottawa, and
Yes.
tell us a little bit more about that. Like
Yeah.
what are your thoughts about
Well,
that?
it's interesting because again, it's like, I come from a family on both sides of my family. With that said, well, one side said, don't trust them,
Mm,
because my grandfather
mm,
on my father's side had been in the Olympics in 1912, had run
mhm,
for Canada, and then had also served in World War One, and came home and couldn't get a job,
mm,
and didn't have his benefits. So
mm,
he went home to Norrie House and he said, don't ever trust them.
mm,
My grandfather Samson, great grandfather Samson Beardy said, "We bow to no authority but God. This is our land, and we are
mm,
our own people." So, I understand that, the idea of sovereignty for our own people. This,
Mm.
serving in that government is not, serving that. And so, but I thought one of the things that being a practical person, I think that comes from our trapline background,
Yeah.
like as trapline people, we're very practical. You have to get things done. You can't, sort of ponder too much. We can ponder once we're situated, but when you got to get going, you've got to get everything right.
Yeah.
Got to
Yeah.
know how to do everything right. You've got to get it done and you've got to survive. So there's no fooling around, right? So
Yeah.
you're always thinking about how do you prevent injury?
Yeah.
How do you prevent mistakes? How do you
Mhm.
get things done? Those are really the ethics of that northern
Yeah.
lifestyle.
Yeah.
And I think that to me, I thought, I was working on a self-government agreement here, then I was, because, when I came home, I have a degree in history. So I was, doing a lot of videotaping a lot of the elders for the self-government process. And then started working on, I'm from Norrie House, so Jordan's principle, that's when that work was just beginning. So, just starting getting involved with all of these sort of local and regional issues. I was doing a lot of communications, contracts for people. And I thought, one of the biggest things that you can see so plainly is that we're federally funded.
Mm.
So if you don't have a federal representation that is saying, you know what, the money that you're hallmarking for Indigenous people, for First Nations people, is going to the province. That's a big problem
Mhm.
because we'll never get that money back.
Yeah.
Jordan's principle is not a CFS issue.
Mm.
It is those are health services, so
Yeah.
there was all of these things happening. We had a suicide crisis that was ongoing, and and again, that federal funding was going to FNIB, and then you have FNIB people trying to you know they're recommending these really big projects. Oh, you need to have this, you need to have that, but they're not prepared to fund it. So what we could see, and because we had, again, our riding for the Liberal Party, we had the local body in Norrie House. And
Mhm.
so, they had sold memberships. They had got a lot of people got involved because of the Aboriginal Commission. It was the only federal party where you could have a voice on the policy of the party,
Mhm.
where you could, then affect changes, and which would be things like, I mean, as simple as that federal funding going to the province. That doesn't work.
Mhm.
So people didn't understand jurisdictional issues, right?
Mhm.
They
Yeah.
didn't understand, um, like, say, for instance, the fact women's shelters.
Mhm.
So federal funding for women's shelters going to
Yeah.
the province having, putting that money into provincially run shelters that were then unionized and couldn't provide Indigenous programming,
Yeah.
right? So you could see where all of these barriers were in place.
Yeah.
Although the federal government might have like some good intention, the researchers and even the legal people, in Ottawa,
Yeah.
didn't understand the barriers
No.
because we hadn't been in parliament,
Right.
so there was literally, I had to outsource my legal reviews on my private members legislation because they
Mhm.
didn't have enough knowledge of Aboriginal law within
Yeah.
even
Yeah.
parliament, their
Yeah.
resources. So that to me, on that, in practical terms, I thought, okay, one, I do always feel, and I do believe this, that we have sectors of society that are really important. It's important to be an activist.
Yeah.
It's important to say, "No, that's not our system. You know
Yeah.
what? We shouldn't be having
Yeah.
legislation that affects our people being made by those people." That's right.
Yeah.
I agree
Yeah.
with that. But
Yeah.
at the same time, we see like all of this legislation happening.
Yeah.
Like, remember the legislation that was about 20 years ago, this they were going to make First Nations Governance Act.
I was just going to say that. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So remember that? Like
Mhm.
what a mess that would have been, right? So,
Yeah.
we had to, I felt that we have to make an impact on these parties that are like at in those places.
Yeah.
And so when
So
I was asked to
I'm
run
sure
by
you
Norrie
made it.
Health,
Yeah, I'm sure you made an impact personally with every single person that you met because you're impactful. But the larger question of how do we make an impact on the inside? Do you think that happened?
I think that there's like little things like
Yeah.
I remember that for sure when when Todd Russell and Nancy Karatak and I were there, we would say that Indigenous rights are human rights. We're talking
Mhm.
about UNDRIP, right? Like things like
Yeah.
that. Um, Matrimonial property law,
Yeah.
like they just didn't understand that. They were like convinced that other things, and I would always say, why is it that you do not? What are the obstacles to listening to Indigenous people?
Yeah.
So just really trying to say that to them, and a lot of times they felt, you feel like you're like the bubble, you're
With the
you're
pin.
poking
Yeah.
their bubbles all the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
But my father did say to me, just say what you can in the house, get it on the record.
Yeah.
That's I'm maybe not going to be the person who's going to make the change,
Yeah.
maybe, but maybe it'll make some change or
Yeah.
impact something.
Yeah.
So, because I didn't think I was going to win the election for sure. None of us did think
Huh.
we were going to win that election when we
Huh.
ran in that election.
Huh.
So when we did win, and when I did win, I was shocked. However, I learned a lot about, you know, um,
How it really works, eh?
how it really works. And the
Yeah.
fact that there is, um, when you think of like I think of things like people talking about wasting money on First Nations issues.
Mhm.
That's our money for one.
Mhm.
Those are the kind of things that became really, really apparent to me when I was over there. Was the wealth of this country is our wealth.
Ah.
That this legislation, I'm not sure how. I am not that savvy, in terms of like, politics about sovereignty versus third level of government, like those kind
Yeah.
of things.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I don't know that big picture. I don't have a law
Yeah.
degree, but what I do know is that there is we are still in a place where we have, Canada has not acknowledged that this country is ours and the
No.
wealth of this country is
No.
ours.
No.
And that we are not in a position to, you know, maneuver.
I think
Although I think that our case law is really strong,
it's
and
always
that
been. Yeah. It's
and
always
that
been.
case law will be, I think, what changes things.
Yeah.
So I think that, you know, I often think of like people that are oppressed, and I think, okay, it takes a long time for those changes to happen. So we've seen a lot of change in our little lifetime.
Yeah.
Um, and so I don't feel as my father, who lived to be 94, thought, well, maybe we will not ever see self-determination. I think we will. Like I feel like, with the case law, with the fact that our people are getting stronger, that we
Mhm.
will
I
we,
feel too
we
that
will
the
survive.
the
And
the where we're at in this point in time, like things like in Manitoba, having the first Indigenous premier, First Nation premier, there's been Métis premiers, in this country, and so visibly and
yes,
strongly Anishinaabe,
yes,
that, and then his colleagues, having, uh, Nahani and Bernadette and Ian, and I'm not sure who else is there, but
yes,
like there's a rising number.
yes,
And so there's that. And then the other thing that makes me believe that it's possible, because the real question is what the one you posed about 10 minutes ago, which is, what do we have to do to be heard? We can't even get in a debate when we're not even heard.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, okay, yeah, we got it, but I know you don't have it. You
No,
don't get it, you know?
no.
So getting, for us to be heard, it occurred to me when you were sharing, is that if every single person wearing an orange shirt, across this country did what? Did what about the fact that we're not heard, eh? You know,
Right. Good question.
it's orange shirt and, you know,
Well, I think that one of the, like, for instance, I'm producing now, television, and it's still shocking to me to see the numbers, right? Where, in Manitoba, we are, like, I think we make up 15% of the population.
if we're lucky.
That should be reflected in
Yeah,
every workforce,
yeah,
that, and then it shouldn't, and I think that the other thing that's important about Canadians, is that their expectation is that we come into their workforce and we behave and act and have their values. And
totally.
that's not okay. So I
Yeah,
think that that's part of what needs to be changed. What
yeah,
we have found in our work in production is that when we implement our own values into the policies of the work, so we use the Indigenous Screen Office, they have the protocols and pathways document. And I think every union should be doing this, like, and that they should be doing the work with Indigenous people to implement those into their policies, and then their targets, so
yeah,
that we implement these policies that then even the non-Indigenous people have to adhere to.
yeah,
And what we have found is that non-Indigenous people prefer our HR, system to theirs.
yeah,
So they find that ours is kinder,
yeah,
is not like punitive. They don't feel afraid to go into the process. So that so we've been very successful with our HR policies and our policies at large for our crew. And so I think that that's something that I feel like, even when I did the ballet with the RWB, one of the biggest surprises for me was how much the dancers responded to the ceremony. So
mm,
they have kept ceremony in their process.
mm,
It's part of their ongoing process for their dancers, and they have a
beautiful.
lodge that they work with. And that was 9 years ago.
Hmm.
And so that, I think, is where we really need to have resources that should be available to, and again, sometimes they don't know where to get those resources. And sometimes the places that should be creating those resources, they're not, like,
Yeah,
we need
yeah,
to create resources.
yeah. So, Tina, I'm conscious of your request that we
Yes.
finish at around 10 after the hour,
Look, it's
because
11:11.
I know you and I know, eh? You and I have known each other a lifetime, and I'm so grateful for that. And I think you have to come back, like in, let's say, 4 or 5 months from now, and let's see where things are at. Because I totally enjoy visiting with you, and you're brilliant, you're beautiful, you're strong, you're clear. Yeah, I just love being with you. And so let's just each say some closing words, and then I'm going to hit the end stream, and then you and I'll say goodbye offline, and that'll be that. Okay. So what do
Mhm.
you want to say in closing?
Kinanaskamitin is like,
Mhm.
thank you so much, Joan. And kinanaskamitin, like, to all the people, because I'm just really a fortunate person. And I also, um, I'm just grateful for this day, I'm grateful for the teachings of our people. And I look forward to, um, Joan's work continuing. And I'm grateful that I can continue the work. And I just, I really do wish everybody, peace. This is a challenging time. It has been for a number of years and it continues to be so. So, as my mother would say, just say your prayers. And
Mm,
my brother would say, do what's in front of you.
mm.
And peace to everybody. Mm.
Oh, may God,
I
may
gotta
God.
say,
I gotta say. So for me today, and every episode, I decided at the beginning when I created this podcast that you know me, I love laughing, I love being stupid and hilarious. I mean, being brilliant doesn't preclude being funny.
that's right.
So I fess up that I have a really serious beaded earring addiction. And so I thought I'm going to justify my addiction by featuring a pair of earrings every podcast.
Oh,
So
wow.
these earrings are uh, beautiful, singular pieces of art made by my daughter, Amelia Carlick, who's
Mm.
an artist. And so her beading like is not geometrical the way that the beading is. It's more Klingit. She's Klingit. It's more
Oh,
fluid.
nice.
It's like the ocean. Like they don't. Lots of times her earrings match generally, but not specifically. And I
Right.
love that you can look at one side of my head and see one thing, and look at the other side of my head and see something similar. But if you look closely, it's a little different, eh? So
And
I
what
love
is it made of?
there she puts these stones in them, and
Beautiful.
I don't know, she just puts all kinds of stuff in her earrings, and so she's quite shy. So if anybody wants earrings from my daughter Amelia, just message me and I'll connect you. And
Okay, can I tell you about my earrings?
yes,
So
please.
these earrings are made by
Move your hair,
Tanis
move your hair,
Thomas.
move
Mm,
your hair first. There we go.
okay.
Yeah.
And they are pounded, like she makes the pounded
Oh,
silver. It's called Boreal Forest Workshop. She is
beautiful.
Cree from Fisher River First
Oh,
Nation.
what was her name again?
Tanis Thomas.
Tanis Thomas. Beautiful. Yeah,
Yeah.
we're definitely all about the earrings and self-decoration as Indigenous people. So,
We have so many artists that are making so many. I went to the arts and crafts event last weekend
oh
in
my
Manitoba.
God.
I swear I was going to go for half an hour. I stayed for 2.5 hours visiting.
Yeah,
Hmm.
I just don't even go because I will spend way too much money I don't have. Okay, I'm going to end the stream and we'll say goodbye
Like I
offline.
say, bye, everybody.